If we are interconnecting our Cisco Catalyst switches with trunks, those trunks could be a point of failure. We need to be able to troubleshoot and to gather information about our trunks. The main command I would use to start gathering information about a trunk is to do this. I would do a show interface trunk, and that's going to give me a summary of which ports on this switch are configured as trunks. No surprise here, on switch SW1 we have port fast Ethernet 1/0/2. It's connecting up to SW2, you might recall, and we're using .1Q encapsulation. We've got the default native VLAN. We're currently trunking, that's good news, and our mode is set to desirable. But in this simple topology, a couple of back-to-back switches, I've injected an issue. And I want to test you watching this video if you can spot what's going on. Let's say that a trouble ticket comes in. Someone reports that they're unable to communicate with a server or with the internet, and you narrow it down to the link between these two switches. You realize that that user's traffic is not passing from SW1 to SW2. Something must be going on with the trunk. Let's see how we might gather information, and I want you to see if you can spot what's going on. First, let's take a look at the configuration of SW1's interface, fast Ethernet 1/0/2 specifically. Well, it's in the up state. It's not shut down, so that's good. We're forcing the encapsulation to be .1Q. The mode is desirable. We could have an issue if the mode happened to be auto on this side and auto on the other. Remember, if both sides are set to auto, they're both willing to form a trunk, but they're not going to be sourcing those DTP frames, those dynamic trunk protocol frames, which suggest that a trunk be formed. But here we're saying desirable, and we saw from the previous output that we are trunking, so we know the trunk was brought up. But that's something to look for. If both sides are set to auto or both sides are set to modes that would be incompatible with forming a trunk. Let's go take a look at the switch on the other side of this link. Let's go to SW2, and let's also issue a show interfaces trunk command. And you see that this side is set to auto, but that's okay. We are trunking, we see. We're set to auto, so we would not initiate a trunk negotiation, but we can certainly respond to a trunk negotiation. And we see that we negotiated our encapsulation type. We didn't hard code ourselves to be .1Q. That's what the N means. It means it was negotiated. We see the same list of VLANs that are allowed and active in the management domain. We had 1, 100, 200. Just to bounce back to switch SW1 really quick, we see those match up. That's something else to look for. You might remember we could specify which VLANs are allowed over a trunk. That's happened to me before. I'm not sure why a certain VLAN is not allowed across the trunk. It doesn't show up in this listing. And then I go back and look, and oh yeah, it was denied. But here, we don't have that issue. So can you spot any inconsistencies? Can you spot anything that might be misconfigured? Again, this is the look at SW1. I'll pause here for a moment, and then I'll go over to SW2. Feel free to pause the video if you want to take a longer look, but I'm going to move to SW2 right now. And on both switches, we're taking a look at the show interface's trunk output. And remember, we're saying that some traffic is not making it through. However, some traffic is. I should point that out. It seems like traffic for a specific VLAN is not making it through. Can you spot what's going on from the output of these commands? Hopefully by this time you're able to spot that there's an inconsistency in the native VLAN. The native VLAN is 100 on SW2, but if we go back to SW1, the native VLAN is just 1. That could be a problem. Do you recall what a native VLAN is? A native VLAN is a VLAN on an IEEE 802.1q trunk that is not tagged. The other VLANs, they get 4 tag bytes, and inside those tag bytes we have a VLAN identifier to say this frame belongs to VLAN 100 or 200. There are priority bits for quality of service purposes, but there's one VLAN called the native VLAN that does not receive any of those tag bytes, and the native VLAN should match up between switches that are interconnected with the trunk. Otherwise, we could get what is referred to as VLAN hopping. Imagine this. Let's say that in our trouble ticket, the user was connecting into this switch, and they were a member of VLAN 1, the native VLAN, and there's a certain subnet associated with that, a certain IP address space. Well, the native VLAN is not going to be tagged, so imagine what happens. SW1 forwards this user's frame over the trunk untagged to SW2. SW2 sees an untagged frame. What would SW2 think about that? Well, on SW2, untagged means, oh, you must be a member of VLAN 100. So that means that this switch might forward that frame out of VLAN 100 ports. That's not what we want. We just did VLAN hopping. We hopped from VLAN 1 to VLAN 100, but the subnets are different on those two different VLANs, so communication is not going to be possible. Hopefully you're able to spot the issue that I created for you, but again, some common things to look for. Make sure your trunking modes are compatible. Make sure that both switches agree on the encapsulation type. You can check here in the output of the show interfaces trunk command to see if you are indeed trunking, and you might also take a look at the VLANs allowed and active in the management domain to make sure that one or more VLANs are not being explicitly denied.